live on X, we're live on YouTube, we're live on Facebook, we're live on Rumble. It is good to see you, and boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about today. Right before we got on air, my husband was giving me a crash course in the controversy over prostate cancer. I didn't actually know that prostate cancer was super controversial. Former President Joe Biden, of course, announced over the weekend that he has advanced stage prostate cancer. It's metastasized to his bones. So there's a lot to unpack here. I would like to say from right at the beginning here that it is possible, and it's what we're going to do today, to separate the personal from the political. There are some people saying, well, don't talk about whether or not Biden covered up his diagnosis. Did he know that he had cancer when he was in the White House? Did they deliberately hide it from the American people? Don't talk about that, because instead, just communicate compassion for Joe Biden and his family. Listen, my grandmother died of cancer in January of this year, on January 12th, 2025. I understand the heartbreak of a family member being diagnosed with cancer, suffering the pain of cancer, and dying of cancer. So you're not going to hear any, ha ha, he got what he deserved from me. Far from it. But it is 100% possible to separate the personal. I'm praying for Joe Biden. I wish him a speedy recovery. I'm praying for his family. It's difficult to watch someone you love go through such pain. You can feel that way and pray for him and separate that from the political. Was there a cover up? And what was the extent of this cover up? And who knew about this cover up? And is unpacking that scandal. And that's what we're going to do on the show today, because it seems without question that Joe Biden has had cancer, this type of cancer, prostate cancer, for a long time. And it seems almost impossible that he didn't know he had it until the past month. So we are going to talk about that. My husband, who is a medical provider, as many of you know, new viewers may not know this. He was giving me a crash course in the controversy over prostate cancer. He literally, this was like 10 minutes before we went on air. He handed me this stack of books here. So this book right here, The Great Prostate Hoax. This was written by Dr. Richard Ablin, who was the man who discovered the PSA. Male viewers, especially male viewers over the age of, 40 or 50? I don't even know what the standard of care is for getting prostate checks on an annual basis. The things we have to learn about for this show, I tell you. Um, Dr. Richard Ablin is the man who discovered PSA, which is the blood test that tests for the prostate specific antigen, which is often used for cancer diagnosis. But the man who discovered the prostate specific antigen says it shouldn't be used to diagnose cancer. So we have this book here. We also have this one called Invasion of the Prostate Snatchers, an essential guide to managing prostate cancer for patients and their families. I believe this is of the Maha persuasion, that these are managing tools for people maybe outside of the traditional medical model. Then, of course, cancer in general. We have a different understanding of what cancer is, where it comes from, and how to treat it now, or I should say, through the Maha perspective, than the traditional medical model. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Dr. Thomas Seyfried today, and his book, Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. And then, of course, some absolutely mind-blowing statistics about how many of you watching the show today actually have prostate cancer and don't know it and don't have any symptoms, and why it may not actually matter. So it's going to be a spicy show today. We're going to have a doctor on too shortly, Dr. Craig Wax, who is a family physician, a school physician, and he's going to talk to us about, given his knowledge of prostate cancer and the diagnostic criteria, his management of patients like Joe Biden. He's not Joe Biden's personal doctor, but he's seen many people like Joe Biden, exactly when Joe Biden would have known that he had cancer. There's a top oncologist in our country by the name of Dr. Zeke Emanuel. Maybe you recognize his name. He is the brother of the one, the only Rahm Emanuel. Dr. Zeke Emanuel went on Joe Scarborough's show this morning and said that Joe Biden absolutely knew he had cancer when he was in the White House, and possibly even beforehand. This is a Democrat, like a very far left Democrat doctor, who is blowing the lid on when Joe Biden knew about this diagnosis. So we're going to talk about that. Also, late last week, the former director of the FBI, James Comey, posted on Instagram a picture that he said was a shell formation he found at the beach that said 8647. Now, you and I are not liars and we're not stupid. And so we understand immediately what that means when we see it. 86 means kill, 47 means Trump, 47th president. James Comey claims he didn't know what that meant. He just knew it was something political, so he posted it on his Instagram for fun. And I'm going to tell you today exactly why he did that. He wasn't calling for someone else to assassinate Trump. He was doing something even more sinister. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. We're also going to talk about the interview Kash Patel, FBI director, and his deputy director, Dan Bongino, did with Maria Bartiromo on Fox. They revealed some bombshell information, probably the most significant of which is they both say that Jeffrey Epstein did commit suicide. Jeffrey Epstein did kill himself. So how do you and I reconcile that, which is trusting Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, with our, let's just call it, significant skepticism about whether Jeffrey Epstein actually killed himself? We're going to walk through how to think about that. Today's show is sponsored by The Last Rodeo. This Memorial Day, 1 week from today, a story about grit, redemption, and good old-fashioned family values hits the big screen, and trust me, you do not want to miss it. From Angel Studios, the team behind The King of Kings, Homestead, and Sound of Freedom, comes The Last Rodeo. It's an action-packed story of a retired rodeo legend who straps back in for one last ride, risking it all to save his grandson. He's the oldest rider to ever enter the arena. The movie is about healing broken bonds, facing the past, and proving that real courage means fighting for the people that you love. It's raw, it's heartfelt, and it might just leave you tearing up under that cowboy hat. Please, let me know what you think of this. Theaters are selling out fast, so hurry up, order your tickets now. Go to angel.com/Liz to grab your seats for The Last Rodeo. It's in theaters starting this Friday. That's May 23rd. So get your tickets today. Get out there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It's going to be packed. That's angel.com/Liz. I highly encourage you go see it. We often talk about a parallel economy. Hollywood wants to corrupt, and, conservatives are trying to stage this pop culture comeback where we offer to the market conservative alternatives to oftentimes the satanic offering of Hollywood. But we don't want to offer something just because it's conservative. We want to offer it because it's good entertainment. It's a good, well done cinematic experience. And that is exactly why you should see The Last Rodeo. Not just to support them because they're an alternative to Hollywood, because it's really well done. Get your tickets at angel.com/Liz. That's angel.com/Liz. All right, let's bring Dr. Craig Wax onto the show. Dr. Craig Wax is a family physician. He's also a school physician, and he has political experience as well, policy experience. He's worked in DC for a long time. He's published in medical journals. He's an advocate for medical freedom, so I know y'all are going to love him if you don't already know who he is, which many of you, I'm sure, do. And I want to get his take on this announcement from former President Joe Biden about his prostate cancer. Dr. Wax, thanks for joining the show.
Well, thank you, Liz, and to your talented team that produced this excellent, artful reporting that you do. Thank you again for having me on today.
Of course, it's my pleasure. So I want to bring up on the screen here, this is the announcement from the former president over the weekend. It says, last week, President Joe Biden was seen for a new finding of a prostate nodule after experiencing increasing urinary symptoms. On Friday, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer, characterized by a Gleason score of 9, grade group 5, with metastasis to the bone. While this represents a more aggressive form of the disease, the cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management. The president and his family are reviewing treatment options with his physicians. So I want to just give the floor to you. What's your take on this? Many people are saying that there's no way that Joe Biden did not know until this week or last week that he had prostate cancer if it's this aggressive, if it's metastasized to his bones. You've dealt with patients like Joe Biden your entire career. What's your take on this?
Well, thank you very much. First, let me say that anyone diagnosed with prostate cancer, it's a shame. And although it's a slow-moving cancer, it's still a cancer. And I never recommend anybody sit tight on it. And I mean that literally and figuratively. That's generally my information. And that let me also say that I am not his personal physician. So there is no doctor-patient relationship here. And I don't have any more specific information than you have. So I can comment on the information that I have in the public. So generally, the prostate cancers, As a family physician over the age of 50, I generally do yearly screenings with PSA and what are called DRE, which everybody looks forward to, called a digital rectal exam, which you can't feel the whole prostate, obviously, because it's a big ball of cells about the size of a golf ball or a little bigger. However, you can feel one side of it and you can kind of get a handle on whether there's anything poking out at your finger, basically. I mean, just to frankly speak. Now, the interesting thing is, in my practice personally, we examine every man every year over the age of 50 until somebody says stop. And so
Mhm.
we don't have any age and related reasons to stop. You know, we don't say, well, you've only got 10 years left. Let's forget about this. It totally is individualized. It's based on your own circumstances, how active you are, how healthy you are, or how ill you are, or how inactive you are, and what your personal preferences are. Would we do something with it if we found it, or would we do everything possible immediately? So the there's a couple issues here. So one is, were they yearly screening on an 82-year-old man? I can't answer that question because it's a very personal question. Now, if he was vital and the president of the United States, I imagine he was counseled to have it done every year that he was president and before that, because theoretically he has a whole medical staff. So I can't imagine he wasn't told. So maybe they didn't offer him screening because of age. Maybe he declined screening, or maybe, and of course this worries everybody the most, that he didn't have the screening at all. Now, the important thing to remember about that is the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, which is supposed to be this elite recommendation group that makes recommendations for health policy. Well, we've seen over the last half a dozen years, plus, that health policy in the United States has been wrong-headed and political. Because if you take politics plus health policy, that equals politics. That doesn't equal health policy. So all the issues that we've had, the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, as of this year, has said not to screen people over 70 years old. And were they contacting Dr. Emanuel, who was behind ACA Obamacare, that basically wanted that said that, well, you know, when you get in your 70s you really shouldn't live anymore? I mean, that's a very, very individualized thing. I mean, that's why I'm such a tiger with regard to individualizing care. And that's why the Unaffordable Careless Act has just totally made a mockery of anything left of private health care. But the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force says don't screen past 70. So did they screen the president past 70? Did they not screen him? Did they screen him when he was vice president? Did he have an established cancer and ran telling nobody, essentially covering up or lying? And then was it just him? Was it his staff? Was it everybody around him? Was it a complicit media? I mean, there's a lot of rabbit holes to go down here, certainly. And if you think about it, because he had signs of dementia and potentially, you know, end stage neurologic disorders, perhaps Parkinson's, and the way he walked, the way his face looked like a mask when he spoke and it didn't move. I mean, was that from Botox just to try and make him look younger? Was it because he actually had late stage Parkinson's? It could have been any of those things. Again, I'm just bringing these up as I'm not his physician. But if you think about it, if he was being propped up, maybe they were giving him testosterone. Well, if they were giving him testosterone, that's like pouring gas on a fire. I'm sure your medical husband could tell you that that's not something somebody does. If somebody is on testosterone for whatever the reason and develops prostate cancer, it is pulled away. In fact, somebody at Mr. Biden's State of the Game potentially might even be treated with hormone blockers to block the testosterone to just try and buy him some fading quality time as he goes out to pasture. And again, my feelings and thoughts go out to his family and everybody that knows him and everybody that believes in him. But I find it hard to buy or accept that this wasn't known for 5, maybe even 10 years. And here's one more rabbit hole to go down. Perhaps if he got the 2 mRNA COVID spike protein shots, and then every booster that came out after that, maybe it damaged his immune system. Immune systems are important. Everybody thinks of immune systems as fighting off bacteria and viruses and fungi and anything that gets under your skin, so to speak, literally or figuratively. But it also is, not only is it the military to keep everything out of your body's country, it's also the police force, because Liz, you and I have cancer cells in our bodies right now, and thank God, or nature, or whatever your higher power is, or whatever your belief system
God.
is, that, well, okay, fair enough. We have a diverse audience, and I want to make sure that everybody's included to know that
What did the
they
founders say? Nature and nature's God.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
an all encompassing.
Well, it's what it is. I mean, you can boil it down to the Ten Commandments and the rules in the kindergarten schoolyard sandbox, right?
Yeah.
Don't
Let me
take
ask you
other
this
people's
question.
stuff. And
So
but
I was
but
asking my
anyway,
husband.
if I may, can
Oh,
I
sorry.
just
Go ahead.
finish the one thought?
Yeah,
No
yeah. Go for it.
problem. I want to make sure I get back to it. That the mRNA spike protein shots in every booster could not only damage your ability to be like the military and keep bugs out, it also won't allow necessarily, or could damage your ability to do surveillance in our bodies. That's what I was saying, is you and I have cancer cells right now, but our immune systems are competent and they're picking them out. However, if your immune system gets damaged by whatever the source, whether it's mRNA COVID shots or anything that can damage an immune system, you can't not only fight off things, you also can't fight your own cells that have gone bad.
Yeah, I find that to be interesting. That's actually why I invited you specifically on the show today, because I saw you
Thank you.
posting I saw you posting on X. You're one of the few doctors that I saw. Maybe there are others and I just didn't see them, but I saw you posting about what the mRNA spike protein does to your immune system, because the question that I think a lot of us are asking, most of us,
Sure.
is it weird from a medical perspective, because most of us aren't medical, is it weird to not be diagnosed with prostate cancer, which is an extremely common cancer in men? Is it weird to not be diagnosed until it has metastasized to your bones? Don't we have preventative screenings? You know,
Yeah,
the
it's literally, in 2025, it's unheard of. It's literally unheard of. I mean, usually, I mean, there was a urologist that was on social media in the last 24 hours who basically said what a lot of us were thinking, that this is likely something that you see in Appalachia, that people they don't scan, they don't
don't do
screen, they don't
anything.
trust, and they don't do anything, and they just take their hits from nature or whatever. Also, you also see it in the VA system. Like, if someone has ostracized themselves from all medical care and they only come in when they're broken, well, this is a pretty bad state of broken, but it takes 5 to 10 years unless there are other factors that are involved.
And my husband told me too. I've been texting him about this. He said, especially with the metastasizing of the bones, that's not just urinary symptoms, right? Like you might detect prostate cancer, or even an enlarged prostate that's not cancerous, with just urinary symptoms. Sorry to be so graphic here. This, again, it's so funny what we have to talk about on this
That's
show.
okay. We
But
all
like
urinate. All of us, all ages. We all do it.
that's
It's
true.
true.
A little bit differently for Joe Biden than for me, but you know. But he said the symptoms of
Hopefully.
right, the symptoms of urinary frequency or burning or urgency or whatever it is,
Hmm.
that's different than the symptoms of cancer that's metastasized to the bone. Then you would have cancer symptoms, and I'm going to read you what he said. Cancer symptoms would be
Sure.
fatigue, bone pain, night sweats, weight loss, fever. In a sense, much more serious, but much more significant um,
Yeah. Oh,
cancer
for
symptoms.
sure.
And that's where it gets weird to me. That
Well, you
you like,
start off with obstructive symptoms because if you think about it, your bladder is kind of like a balloon that holds urine, and you're supposed to go empty it when you're told by your spinal cord and your brain to go empty it. Now, a lot of us don't, we work a lot of the day and we're really supposed to. But having said
I
all
know. I
of
have a
that,
4-year-old. I deal with this often.
right, right. And if that diaper is off, you could be in trouble at any time. Having said all of that, it pinches the neck of the balloon and doesn't allow for urine to come out. And when it does finally come out and it finally gets started, the bladder doesn't empty. And that's a lot of times why someone is half full of urine when they go to bed and wake up 2 or 3 times during the night. So rather prostate swelling could be a benign condition called BPH, or it could be all the way through to cancer. And when the cancer, prostate cancer tends to move slowly in general. I think that's a fair statement, over years to a decade. And that's a lot of times why a lot of doctors and public health entities in the government don't recommend doing anything about it or screening over a certain age, which I think is wrong from the get go because it needs to be individualized. But a person that's responsible and is going to be the vice president of the United States or the president of the United States has to give up a little bit of their privacy owing to the
Yeah.
job that they want to undertake. I mean, when I examine somebody to do DOT truck driving or aviation medical exam for pilots, two things that I do, or even school physicals as a school physician that I also do, you have to be fit for the job.
Yeah.
And I think that someone has fallen down on the job determining fit for the job here.
Yeah. And one last question for you. So I think it's fair to
Sure.
say that to summarize everything that you said, that it is weird that you wouldn't get diagnosed until this level, that all of our non medical common sense, our gut instinct here is not incorrect, that it is weird. But
Yeah, I
what
would
would,
say it's atypical and problematic.
okay, atypical and problematic, the much more specific words, but what would be your medical assessment? Like, what are the chances, what are the chances of it being a turbo cancer that we hear about from the
Mhm.
mRNA vaccine that did develop this quickly, that did metastasize over just a matter of months versus a matter of years or even a decade, versus the more typical, 5 to 7 years progression? You'd know about it before this
That's
point.
that's very difficult. That question remains to be answered because that's unclear. Because in my practice and in others' practices that I've been following along with, we have seen more cancers. We've seen recurrent cancers when we thought they were cured. We've seen neurologic disease. We've seen cardiovascular disease. We've seen things across all genres of disease. So it's very, very difficult to pin down. I think the mechanism is there because if you damage, as I said, the surveillance or the police force that your body does over its own cells when they become abnormal, then you're really subject to cancers that proceed unchecked. So I definitely think it's a question that needs to be answered and soon.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I we're going to talk a little bit later in the show about whether or not the American people have a right to know about the personal medical diagnosis of the president of the United States. I would say, and this is coming from someone who I'm pretty private in general, I would say the president of the United States needs to disclose his medical opinions. Dr. Wax, I'm going to let you go. I know you have patients here in about
Thank
five
you.
minutes, and I respect that. We're going to keep talking about this because Joe Biden, the reason I think they covered it up is Joe Biden himself said in July of 2022 that he has cancer. And we're going to
Mhm.
show that video here in just a second. But thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Remember his cancer moonshot also. Well, we're going to cure cancer, and then he established this place at Penn that took a lot of money from China, and then they found papers there that they couldn't quite account for how they got there.
Oh,
The
Biden.
the whole
He's
thing
the
is very
epitome.
strange.
He's
Sorry
the
to
epitome
open
of
that up,
oh
but maybe we'll have a sequel, Liz.
exactly. He's the epitome of oh what a tangled web we weave. All right, I'm gonna let you go and we're gonna get to this video. Thanks for being here, Dr. Wax. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
you. My pleasure.
All right. So, one of the reasons that I think that this is a cover up, and we're going to go through some of the other reasons here, is back in July of 2022, that's almost 3 years ago now, Joe Biden actually on camera he was speaking, he was giving remarks. He said, I have cancer. This is the video. Take a look at it.
And because it was a 4-lane highway that was accessible, my mother drove us, and rather than us be able to walk. And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer. And why can't, for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation.
That's why I and so many other people that I know have cancer. Those words came out of Joe Biden's mouth. They were not garbled. This was not due to his stutter. This was not a moment of dementia. It wasn't one of his moments where he was walking around the stage shaking hands with the air. That's why I and so many other people I know have cancer. And then he substantiated that by saying Delaware has one of the highest cancer rates in the country. That was not a misspeaking. That was not a faux pas. Joe Biden told us in July of 2022 that he had cancer because he knew that he had cancer in July of 2022. That's my opinion. That is my official analysis of the situation. I do not think that this was, we might have evidence, by the way. We might in a future show come revisit this and say, actually, now we have evidence that this was a turbo cancer. There have been a lot of reports from a lot of credible doctors, usually those who embrace medical freedom, talking about the risks of the turbo cancers. That does not seem like the case with Joe Biden. It seems like Joe Biden knew that he had cancer at least in July of 2022, and he didn't seem like he was just processing that new information that day, that summer day in July of 2022. It seems like he'd known that for a long time. So then we mentioned this guy earlier in the show, Dr. Zeke Emanuel. Dr. Zeke Emanuel is Rahm Emanuel's brother, and you will know that the second you see this guy because they look exactly alike. They look like family. They look like brothers. A little background on Zeke Emanuel before we bring him up. Zeke Emanuel was integral in the creation of Obamacare, and he is on video. I don't think we have this video up today, although Spencer can probably find it in a matter of seconds if we want. He is on record saying that he will not have any medical care after the age of 70 because he doesn't think life is worth living once you're over 70 or 72. So, something ridiculously young. It's a very chilling and anti-human viewpoint for an individual, let alone someone who is structuring the healthcare policy of the United States that became law. Absolute creep. Absolute chilling creep. But again, he's brothers with Rahm Emanuel, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste. That's Rahm Emanuel. So Dr. Zeke Emanuel went on Morning Joe, that's Joe Scarborough's show over on MSNBC, this morning and unequivocally took the position that Joe Biden not only had cancer, or not only knew that he had cancer before last week, but that he probably had cancer at the beginning of his presidency in 2021. Take a look at this.
You believe it is likely, if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone, that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you were saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
And I'm just curious again, if your doctor to a president of the United States that is a male, that is an older man, would a prostate test, and again, we're just talking about a PSA screening, a blood test that you could do along with all the other blood tests. It's not even that it would be intrusive. Would this not be one of the first tests that you would conduct as a White House doctor?
If you're a White House doctor in this situation, I think you would certainly discuss it with the president and talk about the pros and cons. I think if you then ask, well, if President Biden says, well, if I'm your father, which patients often do, what would you recommend? I think the fact is that most White House doctors would recommend getting the test. And again, the evidence is, look at President Obama, President Bush, younger than President Biden, and they both got the test.
I think the most chilling thing that he said there isn't even his assurance that Biden did not develop this cancer within the last 100 days. It's the casual tone of voice that he used when he said, oh, yeah, he's had this for a long time, probably even at the beginning of his presidency in 2021. And to me, this changes the whole story. This changes the entire situation because you could make an argument. I probably wouldn't agree with you if you did make this argument, but you could make a valid argument that if a president of the United States is diagnosed with a health condition during his presidency, that it shouldn't be automatic that the president is expected to disclose all of the details of that health emergency for many reasons. And I'm not even talking about personal privacy reasons. I'm talking about, oh, well, it signals to our enemies abroad that there might be a weakness in the president. You don't necessarily want to telegraph that if there's any kind of negotiations or any kind of hostility towards the United States. You could even make the argument that domestically, you don't want to telegraph to your political opponents that there might be a health issue because that could signify in some way that there might be weakness. You could make that argument, and I think it's a valid argument. I don't think that it's fundamentally flawed in any way. I don't think it's immoral in any way to make that argument. So if that's your position, I can sit here and say, okay, I can see how a president, at least for a short amount of time, would keep something private until it's addressed. I'd be okay with that, I think. But huge caveat to what I just said. Huge caveat. If a candidate for president of the United States is campaigning to be president of the United States and is diagnosed with prostate cancer, that candidate is morally obligated, ethically obligated to let us know about it. Again, I'm sorry that politics is such a nasty business that it requires a violation of your personal privacy. That sucks. But we have a right to know before we cast our ballot for a candidate to be president of the United States, whether they're fit for the job and what other factors might impact their ability to do the job the way that we want to do that. We want them to do that job. Just like we do background checks on their ideology and their family and decisions they've made. We go all the way back to their schooling. What groups were they involved in? What grades did they get? Every aspect of their life is scrutinized, and rightly so, because we want a holistic view of their character, a history of their life choices, we want proof that they're not going to be bought off when they're in this swamp by nasty political interests. All of these things are pertinent to how we evaluate a candidate. That's why they're actually out there on the campaign trail and not just, hey, this is the Republican and this is the Democrat. These are Republican policies. These are Democrat. No, we're not just voting for a faceless Republican or a faceless Democrat. We're voting for that person. And we need to know information about that person that's relevant to whether they're going to do the job that we hire them to do if they get to the Oval Office. So if Joe Biden got diagnosed during his presidency with prostate cancer, I still think he should tell us. I still think the American people have a right to know, even though I understand the argument of, oh, we don't want to telegraph weakness. I get that. Still think that he should tell. But if this guy was diagnosed with prostate cancer before the election in 2020, this is like a scandal of an exponentially greater degree. An exponentially greater degree. And that's what I think is happening here. I think that Joe Biden has known about this for a long time. He said in 2022 he knew that he had cancer, and it wasn't one of his garbled statements where it's like, oh, well, Joe Biden, corn pop, shaking hands with the air. It wasn't that. He knew, and they didn't tell us. And so my question here is, who else knew? Did the media know? Obviously, Jill Biden knew. Did Hunter Biden know? Did all of the White House staff know? Was this an open secret? Maybe this is why Joe Biden was going to Delaware for 3 and 4 days at a time, almost on a weekly basis, and yet he didn't have a public schedule. He wasn't meeting with people except for his very closest circle of advisors who were probably in on it. Did the media know? The mainstream media covered an awful lot for him. Did they know? And did they not tell the American people? Because we already know their propaganda, but this should be the absolute kill shot in the reputation of the mainstream media if they knew that the president of the United States had, or a candidate for president of the United States had cancer, and they didn't talk about it. Okay, a couple of interesting comments from X that I want to bring up too about PSA, which is the blood test used to identify prostate cancer, and then also Biden's seeming dementia. Was this actually dementia, or was it a result of perhaps chemotherapy that he was undergoing? We're going to bring those comments up in just a second because they're relevant to this whole analysis here. But first, I want to talk about a new crime that the FBI is calling home stealing. And this is, by the way, not a dramatized name for this new crime. You won't believe what is going on under our very noses. If you thought the squatter crisis was unbelievable, where landlords were unable to evict squatters who were just coming into these houses, setting up camp. And then the law enforcement was saying, well, you as a landlord actually can't evict them. They can just steal your private property. And we were all astounded at that level of crime. Wait till you hear about this. This is, I would argue, even worse than that. If you are a homeowner, you need to listen to this. So the title of your home is the legal proof that you own your home, right? If you bought a house, you know this, obviously. But when is the last time that you checked your home title? If you're like me, the answer might be, well, never. Why would I do that? Until today. This is the crime that I'm talking about. This is home stealing. Today's AI and cyber world allows scammers to actually steal your home title without you knowing it. It's weirdly easy actually to commit this crime, which is why it's growing increasingly common. And the reason that these scammers steal your home title is because they want to steal your equity. Your equity is actually their real target. In fact, you might already be the victim because victims of this crime often don't know until their equity has been exploited. This is how it works. Criminals will forge your signature on one document. That's all it takes. They can use a fake notary stamp. They can pay a small fee with your county. And literally, that's all it takes. Your home title has been transferred out of your name and into the name of the scammer. And then what they do is they take out loans using your equity, your home title. They might even sell your property, and you won't even know that it's happened until in the mail you receive a collection notice like, hey, why aren't you paying back your loan? Or a foreclosure notice on your home. Get out of your home because it's no longer yours and you didn't even realize it. That's why you need to stop what you're doing right now and find out today if you are already a victim. You can use my promo code Liz at HomeTitleLock.com. That's HomeTitleLock.com. Make sure your title is still in your name. You'll also get a free title history report plus a free 14-day trial of their $1 million triple lock protection, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's 24/7 monitoring of your title. So you will get urgent alerts if any changes to your title are made without your knowledge. It won't happen and go unnoticed. They'll call you and be like, hey, you know this is happening? You can go down and make sure that it doesn't happen. If fraud should happen, God forbid, then Home Title Lock spends up to $1 million to fix it, to get that title back, get your equity fixed, get your home back in your hands. Go right now, HomeTitleLock.com. Use promo code Liz. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code Liz. Okay, so on X, everyone's become an expert in prostate cancer today, of course. I myself have an incredible resource. I can just ask my husband, who's a medical provider, and we're going to get his take in just a minute. I invited him on the show today, by the way, but unfortunately, he was booked. When I'm on the show, he is watching the kids. But he is right here on text message answering all the questions that I have as they come up. So a couple of things that I want to read from X. A lot of doctors were weighing in as well. And Dr. Stephen Quay on X said prostate cancer is the easiest cancer to diagnose when it first starts and to watch it progress to bone metastases. The PSA blood test shows the rate of cancer cell growth for even with the most aggressive form. It's a 5 to 7 year journey without treatment before it becomes metastatic, meaning it would be malpractice for this patient to show up and be diagnosed with metastatic disease in May of 2025. It's highly likely he was carrying a diagnosis of prostate cancer throughout his White House tenure, and the American people were uninformed. Now, that's largely what Dr. Wax was saying as well, but I think the critical part of this statement is the middle paragraph where he says it would be malpractice for this patient to show up and be first diagnosed with metastatic disease in May of 2025. So this is what I'm calling for today. And this is incumbent on congressional Republicans who I consider to be largely incompetent. My bar for them is extremely low because they simply are terrible. Convene a congressional hearing of this man's doctors. Find out if they recommended this. Find out if Joe Biden knew about this. This is something the American people have a right to know, for goodness sake. If you think you can hide from us after everything that Joe Biden did, if you think you can hide this from us, unreal. My biggest criticism, I think the Trump administration is doing an amazing job so far. Amazing. I have very few criticisms, and comparing the criticisms I have with the amount that they have accomplished makes the criticisms about this big. But one of the things the Trump administration needs to do in order to get a successful check mark from me at the end of their term is accountability. We have to have the perp walks and orange jumpsuits for people who have weaponized, Democrats who have weaponized The federal government against us, pro-lifers, conservatives, parents against transgender ideology and critical race theory, FBI surveillance, all of these different things. The absolute terrorizing of J6 defendants. We have to have some accountability. The Trump administration needs to focus on accountability. And House Republicans play a large role in that. House Republicans need to convene hearings about Joe Biden's prostate exams and his checkups and his diagnosis. Are we to just sit here and rage about it and speculate about it? Well, fortunately for us, we have elected representatives in the Capitol who are supposed to be doing our work, who have the power to convene hearings to find out the truth. That's part of their job. They're not just legislatures. Part of their role is oversight of the executive branch. Are you telling me that the military units that are the White House Medical Corps aren't under the purview of any accountability? We have to find out. Okay. So then we have, I want to bring this post up too. Who is this? This is a user on X named Yashan, and I'm going to read you his statement in just a second. He says, it occurs to me that all those quote unquote senior moments, he's referring to Biden's like shaking hands with the air and stuff, might not have been dementia, but rather the result of a recent chemotherapy treatment, which can leave a person kind of off for a bit. I found that to be interesting. That's an angle of Joe Biden's senility that we have not yet considered. Someone else on X, who is this? This is Gen X Girl 77, Carolina, says, no, they are trying to save his quote unquote legacy. He has advanced Parkinson's disease and they covered it up. Any neurologist or MD can see he has Parkinson's. I've personally heard several physicians diagnose him just by his hypophonia, gait, masked face. He barely moved his arms when he walked. Those are all signs of dopamine deficiency caused by Parkinson's. So I would not see, here's the thing. I would not put much past the Biden family crime cartel. If they would pull the wool over our eyes when it comes to Hunter Biden's laptop. I mean, literally, they weaponized the censorship industrial complex against you and me. We couldn't even send the link of the New York Post article about Hunter Biden's laptop on Facebook or Twitter at the time because they used the censorship industrial complex to control big tech so that we would not hear the truth about Hunter Biden in the lead up to the 2020 election, which caused Democrats to vote for Joe Biden, who later said, something like 7% of them later said, had we known about Hunter Biden's laptop, we would not have voted for Joe Biden. This is the Biden administration that sent the drug-addled Hunter Biden all around the world as their bag man to collect money from foreign countries and adversaries and shady oligarchs to profit Joe Biden, the big guy. Are we really to believe that they're not going to pull the wool over our eyes when it comes to Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis? It is not a stretch for me to believe that they would hide that. But what's really not a stretch for me to believe is exactly what this Gen X girl posts on X. They don't want his legacy to be, actually, yes, he had Parkinson's throughout his entire presidency. So they are pretending, they are portraying falsely his diagnosis of prostate cancer, which is relatable because it's so common, but the diagnosis comes after his presidency. So God forbid, I have no idea. I don't wish this on him, but maybe he dies in the next year or two. Maybe he becomes so significantly disabled that they can't even weekend at Bernie's with him anymore. Well, they don't want that to simply look like the advancement of what we already said. They don't want him to die during the Trump administration because then we'd all be like, well, he wanted to be president. He would have died in office had they elected him president. And so now they're pretending a new diagnosis that's brand new so that whatever happens in the next 2 years, well, that came after the election anyway. I would not put that past him. But this is why I go back to the personal privacy thing. Does a president owe it to the public to reveal his personal health diagnoses? Yes, of course he does. Of course he does. You don't have to tell me if you have a sinus infection. You don't have to tell me if you have a UTI. You don't have to tell me if you have allergies. I don't care about any of that. I don't even really care about like cholesterol and controversial stuff. I don't really care about that. But serious, life-threatening diagnoses, yeah, you got to tell the public. And by the way, the timing of this announcement is a little suspicious to say the least. There's a book dropping tomorrow called Original Sin by Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson. Jake Tapper, of course, is of CNN. He's the one who excoriated Laura Trump years ago, 4 years ago, for questioning Joe Biden's mental competence. And now Jake Tapper's writing this book, Original Sin, about how the media missed Joe Biden's mental decline. Right, Jake, right. This guy is absolutely shameless. He will do anything to make a buck off of us because he thinks we're stupid. And Alex Thompson, his co-writer, that's the guy from Axios that spoke at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. We played the video of him actually on the show a couple weeks ago because he was the one that was affecting this fake humility. He was like, some of the distrust that people feel in the media, that's on us because we missed this. It was right in front of us and we just didn't see it. And you and I were like, wow, Alex, a lie, and not even a very good lie. Not even a very good job acting out that lie. Obviously, they knew about this. They could see it. They have two eyes just like we do. They could see Joe Biden's mental decline. But this book is dropping tomorrow. The material point that I'm making, this book is dropping tomorrow. And so, of course, Joe Biden drops this announcement over the weekend that he has cancer because now, as this book comes out, apparently detailing Joe Biden's mental decline, although I don't trust Jake Tapper or Alex Thompson, so who knows how accurate it'll be. But regardless, now we are going to be portrayed as, oh, wow, criticizing a man who has cancer. How awful are you? Strategic timing, to say the least. Someone else on X, I'll bring this one up. Who is this? Jim Furlong says, the cancer's metastasized because of the release of the interview audio tapes. Science, follow it. Right. So two significant political things that the Joe Biden camp still wants you to be distracted from. And so did they announce this diagnosis, which is questionable in its timing in and of itself, but contrast it with this book and these audio tapes of Joe Biden's interview with special counsel Hur. Yeah, it's a little more than suspicious. And he's not a person to be trusted to begin with. Again, congressional hearings, anyone? Was this hidden? Was this hidden? And I think that the answer would be yes. Okay, so now we get to the controversy. Like I said, my husband's a medical provider. He tried to give me this crash course like 5 minutes before we came on air about the controversy about prostate cancer because the way that prostate cancer is diagnosed is basically two ways, right? You can do the exam, which many of you are probably familiar with, everyone's favorite medical exam, the prostate exam. Or you can get a blood test. And I think it's not really or, it's and or. And the blood test tests for PSA, which is prostate-specific antigen. But in the early 1990s, when prostate-specific antigen was discovered by this man, Dr. Richard Ablin, it wasn't discovered as a diagnostic test for prostate cancer. PSA can increase due to multiple things. It can increase, sure, due to prostate cancer, but it can increase, this is my understanding, we're going to try to get this guy on the show. We just didn't have time today. It can increase due to exercise. It can increase due to sex. So it's not and never was intended to be a diagnostic tool. It wasn't supposed to be like, oh, get this test, and if you have certain levels, that indicates that you have prostate cancer. But that's how it's used for in modern medicine, which brings me to the second book. All this stuff, my husband's like pulling books off his shelf and like tossing them at me right before I came on air. So wait, is this the book? I think it's this one. This book talks about how the PSA test is used, and this should surprise no one because of all the Maha stuff we talk about this on the show, is used to make prostate cancer an industry. Because the standard of care for prostate health is to do the digital rectal exam, which all men hate, understandably, and the PSA test to identify prostate-specific antigen, but it was never intended to be a cancer diagnostic test. Then if you have indication, abnormal numbers on your PSA, or you detect some kind of nodule on the prostate itself during the digital rectal exam, then you are sent in for a biopsy. But prostate cancer is super common, like more common than even we know. So if you, in this book, Overdiagnosed, Making People Sick in the Pursuit of Health, there is a part on how common prostate cancer is, which really makes you question how we treat it. Because to skip ahead for a moment before I bring you to this, if you are diagnosed with prostate cancer, you can have chemo and radiation, which I don't need to tell you how questionable those are and how damaging they can be. It also is a standard of care to remove the prostate. And if you remove a man's prostate, it generally causes him both incontinence and it renders him impotent, which are two super significant side effects to removing the prostate. And the reason that I question this, the reason that I'm so interested, and like I said, I tried to get my husband on the show, but he's booked right now. He's with the kids. The reason that this is so interesting is, listen to this. According to Dr. Gilbert Welch, who wrote this book, he writes, about a decade after the study at the Cleveland Clinic, pathologists in Detroit replicated this research, we'll talk about it in just a second, and improved on it. They examined prostates from men who had died in accidents. The men were not known to be sick or to have any cancer. And because they studied 525 men of different ages, the researchers were able to estimate the reservoir of prostate cancer in various groups. Okay. And I did not send this to Spencer, so I can't show you this on the screen, but I'll show you my phone screen. There's a bar graph here, and it shows that men between the ages of 20 and 29, again, these were men who died in accidents who did not have a diagnosis or even symptoms of cancer. They had basically had nothing to do with prostate cancer. And yet 9% of these men between the ages of 20 and 29 had prostate cancer upon autopsy. Those are young men. 31% of men between the ages of 30 and 39 had prostate cancer. 40% of men between the ages of 40 and 49 had prostate cancer. 45% of men between the ages of 50 and 59 had prostate cancer. Again, these are men who died in accidents. They had no diagnosis of prostate cancer. They had no symptoms of prostate cancer. You go to men between the ages of 60 and 69, 68% upon autopsy were found to have prostate cancer. Between 70 and 79, over 80% of men had prostate cancer upon autopsy. Is that not mind-blowing? So what does this mean then? It means that the way that we diagnose prostate cancer, or the way that we identify prostate cancer, is kind of suspect. This is my view on it. Because if this amount of men have prostate cancer, and yet they were living happy, healthy lives without it being a problem, something doesn't logically fit together. Because we're told prostate cancer is a cancer that will hurt you and harm you and kill you, and yet half of young men have it, and 3/4 of middle-aged to elderly men have it. That seems weird to me. It seems really weird to me. I don't know if that seems controversial to me. I'm going to try to convince my husband to at least come on the show for a short amount of time to talk about this, because there's also this book, which he handed me, Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. So most oncologists that you'll talk to will talk about cancer being a result of a genetic abnormality at the cellular level. But Dr. Thomas Seyfried provides scientific evidence that that's not really the case, that cancer cells begin as normal cells and then they're harmed. They're harmed by toxins, they're harmed by carcinogens, and that damages the mitochondrial function of the cell. But when it becomes a cancer cell, it's not able to essentially kill itself. Ordinarily, when we have a cell that goes bad in our bodies know to kill it off. But cancer cells, that's not what happens. They don't kill themselves off. So perhaps when we have a strong immune system, our immune system keeps them at bay. But then maybe when our immune system isn't as strong, those damaged cells, which were damaged as a result of something that damaged them, they start increasing until they form tumors and they eventually metastasize and overtake. Again, this is all scientific evidence, even though it is outside of the mainstream understanding of cancer and outside of the mainstream standard of care for the treatment of cancer. But again, we're pretty maha around here, and we have the scientific evidence to back it. So Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, a really dense book, but that would explain to a certain extent that, combined with the fact that prostate cancer is an industry, it's a very profitable industry. All of these screenings, especially the PSA test and then the surgeries that men undergo, let alone the chemo and radiation, that's an extremely profitable industry. And it seems like they may have taken advantage of men. It seems like this might be something that, if I were you, if you were a family member of mine, I would encourage you to read all these books about prostate cancer. We're going to try to get some of these doctors on the show as this conversation about prostate cancer continues, because We need to expose not just big pharma from the vaccine standpoint or from the opioid standpoint, but there's a lot happening in the medical industry that is wrong, and that for the same motivations, right? Incentivized to profit based on faulty science and an assumption that you and I won't do our own research, and then ostracization of any doctor who dissents, the same thing happens. And maybe the same is the same with prostate cancer. Again, maybe that's not relevant to Joe Biden's particular situation here, because he most likely was in a situation where they knew about this for a long time. Not even my speculation. Joe Biden said it himself. Joe Biden said these words himself. But we will continue. And again, as my husband texted me, like, if it's metastasized to the bone, you're not just going to have the urinary symptoms. You will have those, but you will also have cancer symptoms, which are fatigue, bone pain, night sweats, weight loss, fever, et cetera, which should make you wonder if something's wrong with your health. Okay, I know we're over time already today. I do have something important to say about James Comey and the shell formation that he supposedly found on the beach that says 8647, referencing, of course, killing Trump. There's a reason he posted that, and it's not because he's necessarily calling for the assassination to Trump. I'm going to tell you why he did this in just a second. But one of the sponsors of the show today that we're so happy to partner with, and you guys have been so great taking part in this. It's really a ministry. It's not even an effort. This ministry is preborn. Preborn. When a mother with an unplanned pregnancy is deciding what to do, should she abort her child? Should she keep this child? It's overwhelming. That mother is facing pressure. She probably wants in her heart to make the right choice, but our society's brainwashed a lot of women and told them that it's just a clump of cells inside, or you're more important. It's your body. You can do whatever you want, or your career is more important than children. And sometimes it's even people in her personal life. Maybe the father of her child doesn't want to take responsibility for his actions. He wanted to have promiscuous sex, and then he didn't want the responsibility of fatherhood. Maybe it's her mother that's telling her she needs to achieve certain career status before she should have a family. Whatever the misinformation that she is facing, the lies that she's being told, it's not the only way. Preborn is dedicated. Their whole ministry is to love these women in their moment of crisis and to empower them with the choice of life. And we call it an eternal moment. And I'm going to tell you exactly why. Briella was ready to take the abortion pill, which, by the way, accounts for the majority of abortions in the United States now. And you can get the abortion pill online. You don't even have to see a doctor. You don't go into a clinic. You take the abortion pill, it aborts your baby, and then you give birth to that dead baby, oftentimes on the floor of the bathroom. And I'm sorry to be graphic. I'm not trying to be gratuitous by being graphic, but it's important for us to understand the reality of the situation. After Briella ordered the abortion pill, for some reason, we don't know why, the abortion pill never arrived in her mailbox. And because of that, she decided to go into a physical pregnancy clinic. And when she did, she received a free ultrasound provided by Preborn. And it was at that moment that her eternal moment happened. Not only did her baby wave to her on that ultrasound screen, but then she realized this was the baby boy that she prayed for. Eternal moment. This month of May, can you help us bring life to both babies and mothers by sponsoring ultrasounds? An ultrasound, when a mother sees her unborn child on the ultrasound screen, it doubles the baby's chance at life. The goal of the Liz Wheeler Show is to sponsor 400 ultrasounds this month. And we're going to keep you updated on how many babies that we are saving together. One ultrasound is just $28. 5 ultrasounds are $140. Every penny goes towards loving mothers and babies well. My challenge to you today is, will you join us? Simply dial pound 250, say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, keyword baby, or visit preborn.com/Liz. That's preborn.com/Liz. I just want to extend my personal, this isn't even on behalf of Preborn, my personal gratitude for all of you who have made this commitment and joined us. You are actively saving lives by this generous action, and I'm very grateful for you. I actually have such high standards for you all on this show. I expect nothing less, but I'm so grateful that you guys are taking part. Okay, before we go, I know that this has been a long show today, but we cannot go without talking about James Comey. Over the weekend, James Comey posted, and I think we have a picture of this, on his Instagram account. He posted a picture of a sandy beach. On this sandy beach were rocks forming the letters 8647. There it is on the screen. And James Comey's caption for this picture was "cool shell formation on my beach walk." Now, what does this mean? Well, you're not stupid. You are not a liar, and you're not 2 years old, so you know what it means just the same as I do. It means kill President Trump. 86 means kill. 47 refers to the 47th president of the United States. Obviously, that's Trump. 8647 is also grown increasingly common as a battle cry for the radical left, who, of course, have staged violence against President Trump. They have for years. This is not new. All the way back with the Antifa violence, whether it was setting up their autonomous zones and the crimes that were committed there, whether it was the Black Lives Matter riots, looting and burning and assaulting cops, whether it was actual assassination attempts against President Trump, whether it's the threatening and the swatting of conservatives who support Trump, whether it's all the different types of violence that the left actively engages in out of their warped, twisted, immoral, evil idea of resistance to President Trump. 8647 has become somewhat of a battle cry. You don't go to a radical leftist protest or a march or anything like that without seeing signs that say 8647. All this being said, James Comey knew exactly what he was posting when he posted this. He is also not an idiot. He's a bad person. He's not an idiot. After the righteous indignation that we raised online when we saw James Comey's Instagram post, he deleted it eventually, and he posted this as a follow-up. He said, "I posted earlier a picture of some shells I saw today on a beach walk, which I assumed were a political message. I didn't realize some folks associate those numbers with violence. It never occurred to me, but I oppose violence of any kind, so I took the post down." Absolute lie. Unquestionably, James Comey's not telling the truth, but this is James Comey's sort of slimy, shady, cagey way of speaking, and he's always spoken like this. You can picture him on interviews back when he was FBI director. He'd go on interviews and he'd always have this sort of demeanor. Well, the way I see it, and let me tell you, that's a tactic. Going, that shrug and that shrug of the face, I didn't realize it. I would never associate those numbers with violence because I'm too good of a person, is what James Comey is trying to tell us. I'm too above board. I'm up here on my moral high horse here. James Comey was director of the FBI. As director of the FBI, you deal with the worst of the worst criminals in our country. And no, I'm not talking about parents who oppose critical race theory in their children's classrooms. I'm talking about drug traffickers and sex traffickers and international crime syndicate and gang members, MS-13 and Trendy Aragua. He understands what 86 means in gang culture. This is not even some kind of rhetoric that's super specific to a certain niche gang. Everybody in pop culture, even I know what 86 means. You know what 86 means. Everyone knows what this means. James Comey was posting this on purpose. That's fairly widely established. I don't need to make the case for that because, again, we're not stupid and we're not liars. We know what that means. James Comey knows what that means. So why did he post this? Was he intentionally posting this or posting this intentionally to call for or encourage other people to kill Trump? Not necessarily. I think it's deeper than that. What James Comey is doing is he's testing the Trump administration. He's testing them by posting this to see if they will actually hold anyone to account. And this goes back to what I said earlier in the show. We've talked about this pretty often on the show because I think it's really important. Will they, the Trump administration, actually prosecute anyone? Will they actually arrest anyone? Will they actually charge anyone? Will anyone be convicted? Will they go to prison? Or are we just going to pseudo-prosecute wrongdoers in the court of public opinion on podcasts and cable news shows? That's what James Comey is trying to establish with this post. Can the Trump administration be rhetorically tricked? Again, wink, wink. Oh, he says, I didn't realize that had to do with violence. Will they fall for it? What he's doing is essentially what shooters or bombers do when they take a school shooter, for example. A school shooter will sometimes call the school and threaten a school shooting and then not follow through with it. And the shooter does this in order to test the response from the school district. Do they lock down? Do they have parents come? What kind of police response is coordinated? How buttoned up are they? What are the procedures? What can be observed from the outside in order to identify vulnerabilities so when the shooter actually stages his attack, he knows what to expect so that he can take advantage of it however he wants. That's what James Comey's doing. This is a dry run. Will the Trump administration actually hold anybody to account? Yes, we got a tweet about it from Kash Patel, director of the FBI. That's great. Yes, reportedly, James Comey was also interviewed by the U.S. Secret Service. Okay, also great. But will anything actually happen to him? Will he be prosecuted? Will he be charged? Will he be arrested? Or is he going to get away with this? Well, that question is up to the Trump administration, and it's exactly what James Comey is testing. I don't know who he's testing it on behalf of, but now it's up to the Trump administration to answer that question. Is he going to get away with it? Is he going to be able to talk his way out of it? Is he going to be let off lightly? Are they going to just wrap him on the knuckles and say, no, James Comey, we're not going to tolerate that. You're going to have a federal law enforcement officer knock on your door. Well, James Comey doesn't fear federal law enforcement officers, does he? Or are they going to arrest him and charge him and prosecute him for what he did? The Trump administration has yet to answer that question, but that is why James Comey posted that. All right, we have a new show here on Blaze TV that I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard good things about it. And I wanted to, I think it might be up the alley of some of you guys. If you like the bold, the thought-provoking, check out Rick Burgess's brand new series. It's called Strange Encounters. It's streaming right now on Blaze TV and on YouTube. It's not about ghosts or Bigfoot, like the name might suggest. It's about real spiritual battles that we face every day. Rick dives into the unseen world, but through a biblical lens, which is interesting. It's timely. It's something you might want to check out. Strange Encounters. Watch it now on Blaze TV at blazetv.com. You can get $20 off your subscription, or you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. That's blaze.com or blazetv.com/Liz and get $20 off your subscription. Okay. I know I said at the beginning of the show that we were going to break down the interview that FBI Director Kash Patel and his Deputy Director Dan Bongino did on Fox News this weekend with Maria Bartiromo, because there's some significant revelations in that interview. There's also a question a lot of us have. They made this assertion that Jeffrey Epstein did kill himself, that it wasn't a murder. They said, we've seen the files. We can assure you we know a suicide when we see it. So it's left a lot of us wondering, okay, do we believe Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, who are absolutely trustworthy individuals, as based as they come, but what they say contradicts the evidence that we have about what happened to Jeffrey Epstein? We were going to talk about that today, but we are out of time. So we will talk about that tomorrow without fail, because I have an answer about how we handle this situation when all this evidence. I mean, remember the trauma report to Epstein's neck? His hyoid bone was broken. That doesn't happen if you hang yourself. That happens if someone strangles you. So how do we reconcile the words of trustworthy individuals like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino with the evidence that we have in front of us? How do we as conservatives handle that? And I'm going to have an answer about that for you tomorrow on the show. So make sure you're subscribed at youtube.com/Liz Wheeler, at x.com/Liz_Wheeler. We have video on Spotify now. Go over, subscribe on Spotify. We're on Facebook. We're on Rumble. We're on Apple Podcasts as well, wherever you get your pods. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.